Hello, everybody, and welcome to this SAG-AFTRA Conversation at Home. Before I introduce our special guest today, I just want to, as always, remind everybody watching that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation has a COVID-19 relief fund to support SAG-AFTRA performers who are in urgent need as this pandemic continues. Since March of 2020, the foundation has given over $6.1 million in aid to 6,500 performers and families facing extreme hardship. If you are a SAG-AFTRA member and you need help, please ask. And if you're able to help support our community in this crucial effort, please give. All the information can be found in the description of this video. My name is Dave Karger. I am a host on Turner Classic Movies, and it is my pleasure to introduce, from the movie The White Tiger, actress and executive producer, Priyanka Chopra Jonas. Hello, Priyanka, great to see you.
Hi, Dave. So good to see you too.
My understanding is that you actively sought to be a part of this movie. Before I ask you why, tell me how you did it.
I chased after it. I remember reading about it in Deadline or The Hollywood Reporter, one of the trade magazines on Twitter. And I'd read the book in 2008 when it had come out. And this was a time when I was in India and I was working there. And it really moved me, and it pissed me off as well. And at the same time, it was sarcastic and funny and dark. And, it kind of like really messes with your mind, the book, and the pace is insane. So when I read that it was being adapted by Ramin Barani, who the book was also dedicated to, and is a director that I really admired. And I was, as an actor, really looking for an immersive experience at that point, because I've just started working in America about 4 or 5 years ago. And I haven't been able to do the kind of diverse roles that I have done in my work in India. So I was actively seeking, an immersive role and an immersive part. But I didn't know because what the female part in this movie would be, because in the novel, it's very nominal. And it's also from the perspective of Balram's character, the main character. So I actually went after it to sort of attach as a producer and, offer my services and be like, I really wanted to EP it so that I could support the movie, especially because it's a diaspora movie and, it is an all South Asian cast, and I really, really wanted to support it. And I met Ramin. I remember he came to see me in Mumbai at my house when I reached out to him saying, would you just meet me? I want to talk to you about it. And he told me that the girl's part was something that he had increased and was really curious. So I said, I would love to, audition for it. He asked me, would you read for it? And I was like, of course. We did that. I met him in New York, in LA, like 3 times. And finally, thankfully, I got the job. But it was really something that I actively went after because I believe in the material tremendously. And I also want to be able to, sort of be at the helm of telling South Asian stories in Hollywood. We don't have the kind of representation that we deserve. South Asians are 1/5 of the world's population, and we don't see that in global entertainment. And I really want to be at the helm of pushing that. So I'm glad this worked out in both ways. But it took a little chasing.
So you answered the how and the why. So what was your reaction when, having read the book and loved the book so much, when you then read Ramin's script adaptation and saw what he had done with the character of Pinky?
So it was really interesting because obviously when you go from a book into a movie, you don't have the luxury of time, right? You have to tell the entire story in 2 hours. So I was very curious to see what the screenplay adaptation would be. But I was very excited about the fact that, Ramin took the predominantly interesting pivots in the story and put them into all of his characters. And Pinky's character became a spoken person. She was, in the book, she was only seen from Balram's eyes. Like, he saw how she looked or he saw what she did. But here, that would have been hard to do because obviously in a movie, you have to be able to tell the character's perspective as well because, you can't just write about his thoughts. So I think that is why Ramin required to make the characters a little bit more 3-dimensional. And in doing that, Pinky's character became extremely complex and interesting for me because I'm Indian. I was raised in India for the predominant part of my life. But Pinky's character is an American girl and she's woke, and she goes into India and she relates with Balram and she levels with him and she's sort of the eyes of the audience. But at the same time, she's human. And when it's convenient, she's not that woke anymore. And she's fake woke and she relates with him and says, my parents worked in a bodega and I studied in the basement. I pulled myself out of that. You should pull yourself out of that. As if it's easy to just want to pull yourself out of the vortex of poverty. It's not. But I actually had to lean into not understanding the complexity of that because I do, coming from, a country that lives in that dichotomy. But I had to sort of lean into being unaware a little bit about that and be gray and, be convenient about how woke I wanted to be. And those are all such human characters. And I just enjoyed it so much.
How cognizant were you? That's fascinating because now that you're saying that, even before you just said it, she's the audience's eyes. I was thinking to myself, wow, Pinky is the way in, particularly for a Western audience.
Totally.
Right? How cognizant were you of that? Because an Indian audience will view her quite differently than a North American audience will.
Totally. And I was very, very cognizant of it. The complexities of being able to play Pinky as, all of these different people was very interesting and amazing for me. I mean, I really, really wanted her to be, an immigrant American girl, New Yorker who has built her life. And she's a winner. She's pulled herself out of her circumstances, She's the Balram of America for herself. What Balram was in India, she relates to him because that's what she feels she was like. But you cannot compare the two. While she had a roof on her head and her parents had jobs, Balram didn't even know where his next meal was coming from. And that's a different kind of poverty. That's a different kind of circumstance. And which is why, I was very, very aware of the character that I was playing. And I was really actually enjoying, playing her double standards of wanting to, be concerned and caring, but at the same time, be inhuman when it was okay for her to do it.
So at this point in your career as a performer and as a producer, what would you say are kind of the guiding forces when you are deciding what to, put your time and energy into? Is it something that you view as a specific personal challenge for yourself, like a lot of the scenes as Pinky, which I want to talk about, must have entailed? Or is it more about thematically what the project is saying and what kind of issues you want to tackle and raise awareness of, or both?
I think for me, they're two completely different things. I'm seeing myself and my trajectory as a producer differently than I'm seeing myself as an actor. I feel as an actor, I'm very nascent in my work in Hollywood. I've just about started. I've done a few movies and a TV show. So I'm still sort of trying to figure what my feet are. I want to be able to delve deep into dramatic parts. I want to be able to scratch beneath the surface, feel uncomfortable. I'm inherently an artist and I want to be able to showcase that in my work here. And secondly, as a producer, I want to be able to create stories, not just for me, but also opportunities for females, for stories that are inspiring, stories that have a social perspective, or even are just fun and entertaining. But I want to be moved and provoked in the stories that I tell. And not all of them have to obviously star me. I want to be able to create a lot more opportunity for brown people in the stories that I'm telling, but also, work with female writers. I've collaborated with some amazing female writers and producers, that are around. And, there's some fun stuff that I'm working on right now, but I see them as two completely different journeys.
Now that I'm hearing you describe it like that, it's really fascinating to me that another person whose name is attached to The White Tiger as an EP is Ava DuVernay, because
Right.
she's someone who's doing the exact same thing. She's, working behind the scenes with Array, her company, but sometimes she's directing, sometimes she's not. Is she someone that you look to as an inspiration in a way?
I absolutely admire Ava tremendously, especially, her history. She comes from independent movies, she's self-made. And now look at her running Array with and making these big budget movies. I mean, she's definitely an inspiration as, just as a female in the entertainment business. I admire her very much for not just the career that she's built for herself, but the narrative that she has in her storytelling. She's so intentional, and I love the stories she picks and chooses. And I was very, very excited when she attached to the White Tiger.
Yeah. You touched on this briefly a couple minutes ago, but there are so many fascinating thematic aspects of the White Tiger, delineations of power in India, the psychology of servitude. What were some of the things that most interested you in the book and the film as far as wanting to bring them to the screen?
The one thing I felt very much so was this may be a story that's based in a specific time, in a specific family in India, but it's such a universal story, and how desensitized we are as privileged society. Anyone who has a roof over their shoulder and doesn't have to think about their next meal is privileged. So how many times we as privileged society have sort of become desensitized to everything else that's happening? The haves and the have-nots exist in two very different parallel worlds. And when is the last time you've driven past a homeless shelter and not looked at it, or a homeless person and just driven away? And that's the reality of the world. This is not an outside in story where we're looking at this guy and his circumstances. He's looking at us. He's looking at everyone else in the room and telling you how he feels when he's hungry, how hungry he is to pull himself out of the circumstances of his birth. Because the majority of the world actually lives like that. And they live in circumstances where they're born defines their future, especially for girls. There's so many girls around the world that don't even have a choice in, their lives. And this movie is about choice. It's about ambition. It's about desire of sort of changing your circumstances. And that's such a visceral feeling. And everyone can relate to that underdog story. And that's what really appealed to me when I read the book, and I thought would be very compelling on screen as well.
The tone of the movie is fascinating, and
right?
It's precarious. You guys and Ramin really handle it very well. It walks that tightrope of being energetic and often darkly humorous, but then tragic and serious as well. How did you guys balance that, and what kind of conversations did you have during the filming of it, or even in pre-production, to make sure you were getting it right?
Well, the intentionality of the story was always energetic, because when you read the book, it sort of jumps out at you. It's so it's like it's alive. You're turning the page. You want to know what Balram's thinking. He's eclectic. You don't know if he's going from black to white to gray. You're sort of trying to catch up to him as a reader. So that tonally, that energy was very important in the movie as well. And I was one of the first people to be cast. And I remember before Balram's character or Ashok or any of the others were cast, Ramin and I were talking about this, and he was one of the first things he said to me was that the music is what's going to create the energy in the movie. So if you think about the soundtrack and how, Balram's mind sort of has a musical soundtrack to it, and that sort of keeps us at the edge of our seat. And every scene that we did, we had to have pace. That was something that was an underlayer. We needed pace, you needed energy, it needed to be alive. And Ramin as a director never, he doesn't say action. He just says, whenever you're ready. So we just kind of used to go into it. In fact, it was very confusing for me in the beginning. Now, having done almost 50 movies, I'm so used to action, right? You're used to someone saying action and someone saying cut. And here's this director who's just like, go for it. So the first day I remember I was standing in front of the camera, waiting for that ready, set, go. I'm feeling it, and like my head's pounding, and I'm just waiting, and no one says action. And everyone was just paused, set's quiet. I sort of looked back because the camera was behind me, and Ramin was just like, whenever you're ready. So politely, after a minute of like me waiting, I was so confused. And then he never says cut either. I have a habit of I keep going till someone says cut. I wouldn't know that the scene's cut till Ramin was standing in the scene right with us and talking to us and be like, you want to try, just there's something else. And I was like, oh, I guess we cut.
We're done. What would you say the fact that he's Iranian American adds to his unique perspective on this material?
I don't know the American side of it, but I think the fact that he's from Iran and his family, in fact, his grandfather comes from a village like Balram does. I think he had an understanding of the complexity of the country and the complexity of the subject. I think he didn't come from he didn't come from a one-dimensional perspective. He came in and he sort of he lived within the story. He used to walk instead of take cars. He lived like Balram. He sort of understood what it was to tell, that specific man's story and not just a guy that you see within this lens. So his specificity for the culture, I think, came from him having the experience and the background of being Irani, probably.
The lead actor in the film, Adarsh Ghor, is extremely impressive. What impressed you the most with what he was able to do? For me, it's his singing.
Oh, he's trained in classical Indian music, and I was actually really surprised by that scene when I saw it. But he also composed that song on set in that scene, and I take so much pleasure in sort of I'm introducing him to the world as his EP, because he's so immersive, and which is why he becomes this character. He worked in a tea store. He walked on streets and got jobs where he got paid 100 rupees a day, which is like almost $1.50 for 12 hours of work. He went and stayed for 2 weeks in a village just to sort of understand, because he comes from a middle class home. He had a house and he had food and he, went to school, but he wanted to really feel what it was like to actually be a Balram. So he went to the village and lived there. What impressed me most about Adarsh was that he didn't try to act like Balram. He didn't try to understand him. He sort of became him. He knew the gravity of the role. He knew the gravity of the part. And I really think he's going to have a formidable career. And I can't wait to see the extraordinary choices he's going to make as he goes forward as an actor.
In case people haven't seen the movie, I'm going to be a little vague. It's referenced in the trailer. Your character is driving a car and a very tragic event happens. That, for me, is that sequence was the most powerful of the entire film. And I was thinking to myself, how did Priyanka put herself in a position to imagine what it would be like to have done something like that? And it's all on your face. And so that's my question to you. What was your process for that specific moment, that specific scene? Given the fact that it's not a play, you couldn't actually do it all in one linear thing. You're doing it bit by bit, shot by shot.
And multiple times.
Right.
The actual incident we shot over one night, but of course it had multiple shots and stuff. But I remember, I've never, by God's grace, been in an accident. I don't know what that feels like. So I was very, very confused and concerned about this scene. And I kept thinking about how I wanted to feel. So they'd created like a little rolled up carpet, which I would sort of run over in the scene. And, we were talking about rehearsing over it. And I said, no, I don't want to rehearse over it. I actually don't want to know what it would feel like at all till I do it, because that's how she would feel. In my head, she's never had an accident before. In my head, she's like me, doesn't understand what this means. So I really wanted this sense of surprise for Pinky's character. And oh my gosh, I think the shot that's in the movie is the first take, I think, because I remember feeling such a punch in the gut when I went over that carpet. And then in the next shot, when we turned around, they had made somebody lie there. So the first time when I turn around to look and I see that person lying there, it was that I really took that with me for I think 2 or 3 days. That feeling of just fear and disgust and just, feeling completely like, don't deserve to breathe for, and the desperation of it being who it was. It was just that scene was very, very difficult to do. And that sense of surprise really took me by shock more than I expected it to.
Where in the shooting process did that scene fall? Was it near the end? Was it in the beginning?
Yeah, it was near the end, and that was strategically planned by the first AD. And he was like, I mean, not too much in the end, but after we gotten used to filming for about 20 days, so it was in a place where I was comfortable and I knew everyone, and it was important for the three of us also to have a camaraderie by then, because that scene really requires us to be sort of free with each other. But and so it was placed really, really well. The way they'd broken down the schedule was really great and very conducive to the actors.
I'm curious about the term executive producer. I think of all the jobs in the movie industry, that's one that has the most wildly different, spectrum of meanings. There's people who write a check and they're an EP. There's people who are actually on set and basically produce the movie and they're an EP. What did it entail for you in this case?
So we're three EPs on this movie. One, Sarah Bremner, who actually was on set and did, the work with everyone, and me, who attached myself, and I come in before and after the movie to be able to promote it, to be able to support it in a really large way, and make sure that as many eyeballs as possible come on to the movie, which means doing a lot of this with a lot of people. And Ava DuVernay came in as an EP about 6-7 months ago, to do the same thing, sort of provide her might and support, and in the post-production experience, sort of be someone Ramin could, lean on, especially during COVID. The post-production happened during COVID. He didn't have a lot of people around him. So she came in, in that position. So we kind of all divided and, did our roles.
I like that. Obviously, it's Ramin's set. He's the screenplay writer, he's the director. At the same time, you on the movie set are the best known person, particularly in India. How do you view that role when that is your status on the set? And I imagine that's something that you are very aware of and take seriously as far as the responsibility of trying to set a tone in addition to the tone that Ramin is setting as director.
Absolutely. I have to say that my co-actor who plays Ashok in the movie, Rajkumar Rao, is an extremely prolific, popular actor in India and in Bollywood as well. So yes, when we were on set or whatever, there'd be crowds and it was hard. But I knew from the very beginning what my role in this movie was. My role as Pinky, as my character, was to make sure that, I can support Balram's story as much as I can. That was always my job. And my other job was to make sure I support the movie. So it was never really about me. And it was never really about Raj. For me, I used to come on set sometimes when I wasn't even filming, just to hang out and see what was happening. But it was always for me about what Balram needed. What did the white tiger need for him to do what he needed to do? And I've now been doing this for long enough to realize that one person doesn't make a movie. It's a collective and it's a whole. And the actors who understand that quickly are the clever ones.
And finally, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it here, but in so many ways, you really are an ambassador of your home country to the world. And I think that's something that you relish. And I'd just be curious to know, when it comes to film and just entertainment in general, what your hope is as far as continuing that role, what you want to do with it.
Well, it's really sort of not a role that I chose, or it was not something that was my quest. I didn't walk in here being like, oh, I want to represent my industry or my country. And I don't think that's true either. There's a lot of, amazing South Asian talent out there who's trying to break, sort of break the door in and get a seat at the table. And that's exactly what my quest is too. I remember about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, Aziz Ansari and I were at an after party after, I think, the Globes or the Emmys. And we were counting the South Asians in the room, and there were six. And we were very excited about that. And I was like, what, Aziz, there's six people in here. He was like, babe, you should be excited. 5 years ago, it was two. I mean, as dark and sad as that joke is, but it's the reality. And I know that there are so many incredibly talented South Asian, writers, actors, who are producers who are trying to push the envelope. But my dream really is, not just for myself. I really do, as an artist, want to be able to play mainstream characters, not to be seen just for where I come from and the country that I come from, or to be put in the box that comes along with being South Asian, but also for, to be able to see that kind of representation in global entertainment. We're 1/5 of the world's population. You don't see that in the movies. And I think that's really my dream. And I'm definitely working towards it. And I know there are a lot of other people who are working towards that too. It's a great time, especially with streaming coming in. I mean, I don't think 10 years ago or 5 years ago, even, an all South Asian star cast with an Iranian director shot predominantly in India would have the budget that it did for us to make the movie the way we did. But Netflix did that, so now we have people like, the streamers that are coming in who are taking a chance on storytelling, which is global and actually has cross-pollination of cultures. And that's, to me, my dream.
That's great. Oh, I congratulate you on this performance. It's so well done, Priyanka.
Thank you so much, Dave.
So, congratulations again. The movie is The White Tiger. It's on Netflix. Priyanka Chopra Jonas, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your time with us for SAG-AFTRA Foundation. And thanks to all of you for watching, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Dave.